Hello, and welcome to the expansion upon the reader response critical lens. This is a really interesting theory because it is so subjective and it's subjective by design. It requires the analyst or the literary critic to essentially bring their own understanding and appreciation of the text. So uh, this really doesn't have a clear or a designated destination. The destination is made according to who reads and who interprets the text. The first concept of reader response theory is that texts require responders, that texts don't bring themselves to life, they require a living being to interpret their story and to experience that story. And that is true across the board, but this is brought to explicit, yeah, let's call it explicit. This is brought to explicit light, and this is one of the foundational features of reader response theory. The second concept is only personal responses exist to texts. That no matter um, who reads a text, even if they are reading it with their most serious face or they're trying to be the most objective and they are simply um, reading a text by looking up the denotated definition of each term in the written text, that would still be their personal experience of the text. And it's also possible for a person to have different personal responses to a text. For example, if they read it at a different time, if they read it when a book when they're 5 years old and then a book when they're 15 years old, they're going to have a quite different response. And that doesn't mean that either of them are invalid or either of them are a correct response. It simply is a personal response according to that context. And the final concept here is that there is no exclusive correct interpretation of texts, that texts um, invite responders to project themselves onto the text and to understand the world as that text has created. And this is really important when you're considering um, what might be the intention of English and the intention of reading literature, which is to grow our empathetic skills and to understand the world not as we have experienced it firsthand, but to consider how the world might be or how someone else might be experiencing the world in a different way. And this last point really emphasizes that point. The language used in reader response theory, uh, the first term I have here is experience. And this is essentially the general definition of experience. It means someone who has gone through an event and they have the memories or recollection or muscle memory, whatever it is, they have some sort of experience that they are bringing to the text. And also that the text itself is an experience. So, take my example of a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old. A 15-year-old could read a book once, put it down, and then pick that same book up again that same day, and they're going to have a different experience because uh, they're going to have a different second experience to their first experience because they just read it, and maybe they would be trying to predict what's happening in the text. Maybe they can remember parts of the text and they're getting anxious or excited or scared about parts that haven't yet happened. So it will be a totally different experience. The second term I have here is interaction. And I may as well throw in this third word, transaction. So interaction means um, there's something that is being made when someone is interpreting a text or reading a text or viewing a text. And transaction is the idea that it's a back and forth, that it's not just the reader that is making the meaning, the text itself is also contributing something to that experience. So it's maybe not equal, but there are certainly two parties or two entities that are involved. You have the text, and you have the reader or the responder. And interaction, I think, is more focused on the product of what's happening there. The seminal contributors to reader response, definitely Louise Rosenblatt and also I.A. Richards. Here is a sample thesis that I developed, and for a text that really resonates with me. For better or for worse, I think this text resonates with a lot of people as well um, because it is quite universal, especially moving through those teenage years when you're learning about your own identity. But I won't get too excited about the text because I could talk about it all day. Emphasized by using a reader response lens, The Catcher in the Rye reveals the angst of living as a contrarian in a conformist society. That is something that resonates with me, and that's why this thesis was crafted in my response to the text. If someone else read The Catcher in the Rye and came to a totally different response, then it would be upon them to justify the parts of the text that resonated with them. This is what resonates with me, and that's why I'm talking about reader response theory. Last thing I would add here is many times you are advised not to use the first person pronouns in an essay. Here, you can almost use your first person pronouns as evidence of that interaction or transaction with the text. And you can come up with some really interesting results of what the text is doing, what you're doing, and what the net effect of that, or what the product is from that really interesting interaction. Okay, I hope this has been interesting at the very least, and all the best. Good luck applying this one. Thanks. Bye.